Hi guys, it's me, ChazRHD, and I'm finally back to talk to you guys about stuff that is actually going on in Formula 1 in 2020 for the first time really since, the middle of February during the first pre-season test. And today, of course, if you didn't know, we had qualifying for the 2020 Russian Grand Prix. A Grand Prix that, of course, we know is just such an exciting Grand Prix. Wonder if you can detect the sarcasm there. But qualifying actually wasn't too bad considering the track we were racing around today and for this weekend. And let's just get into the results of qualifying. I want to say first, though, to everyone who's watching this, it's great to finally talk to you guys again and see you guys again. It's been, since the last live stream, it's been about 7 months, or just over 7 months. The last live stream I did was the last day of the first pre-season test, which was about the 19th of February, something like that. So, yeah, it's great to be back. And today I'm just gonna basically shoot the shit about how all the teams did. But first, in case you don't know what the results were, here they are. So, of course, Lewis Hamilton on pole position, no surprise there. Max Verstappen second. That is a surprise because Red Bull historically don't really tend to do anything around here. I mean, they've never had a podium at this track, which is quite unbelievable to believe because even in the last few years, even though they haven't been dominating like they were in 2010, 11, 12, or 13, they've still had a car good enough to be on podiums. So this shows you how poor of a record they have at this circuit. But today, second for Max Verstappen. Great lap. Valtteri Bottas third. As I'll get onto in a moment, that was poor. Fourth, Sergio Perez. That's good. Fifth, Ricciardo. Sixth is Carlos Sainz. Seventh is Esteban Ocon. Eighth, Lando Norris. Ninth, Gasly. 10th, Albon. That's really poor for Albon. Leclerc 11th. I know you guys can't wait to hear what I think about Ferrari. Kvyat 12th in his home race, Stroll 13th, Russell 14th, Vettel 15th, and then Grosjean, Giovinazzi, Magnussen, Latifi, and Kimi Räikkönen completing the rest of the field. So, let's first get into the best team on the grid and the greatest team in Formula 1 history, basically. And that is, of course, Mercedes. Now, the pictures, by the way, when I go through every single team, they're going to be quite random as to who they show. So if I'm talking about Hamilton, it will show Bottas maybe at the same time. And if I talk about Leclerc, it will show Vettel, whatever. So you'll have to bear with that for the stream. But anyway, for Mercedes, for Lewis Hamilton, you may think, looking at the results, that it was an easy session. But when you actually watch the session, it was not easy at all. So in qualifying 1, it was easy enough. But in Q2, because both Mercedes tried to qualify on the medium tyre, and Valtteri Bottas did, which is very important for the tyre he's going to start on for the Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton's Q2 was very, very messy. So his first run was good enough for P1, but it got deleted because he went was it too far at the last corner over the red and white curb? And that, according to the FIA now, is track extending. So that lap time was deleted. Then he went out on another new set of medium compound tyres and was about to complete his run, and his run was going to be good enough for probably second or third. And then the red flag came out for Sebastian Vettel's crash. And the red flag came out at very nearly, almost the wrong time, because there was 2 minutes and 15 seconds left on the clock when it got back underway. And as we know, to do a lap time around this track, it's about 1:32, 1:33. So on the outlap, I mean, they had to go as quickly as they could, but they couldn't go too quick because they were going to destroy the tyres. And also, you don't want to be too close to a car ahead of you, when you start your lap, because then obviously you'll get held up and you'll end up with a lap time that's half a second to a second slower than it actually should be. So Hamilton, he was down in 15th place, comes out of the pit lane with 2 minutes 15 seconds to go, goes off at turn 2, and 3, goes off the track, and At that point, I thought personally, it's over. He's not going to do it. He's out of qualifying. But then, somehow, after backing up in the final corner to make sure he didn't get held up in traffic, he crossed the line to start his final lap, which was good enough for P4 in Q2 on the soft tyre. He crossed the line to start his final lap with 1.2 seconds to go. I mean, he did judge it very well, but I think it was a bit lucky, to be honest, because if, say, one of those cars ahead of him had backed up slightly, too long for his liking, he would have missed out. So he was kind of lucky in a way, and yes, he did judge it very well to make sure he got enough, enough of a gap between him and the next car, which I think was a Renault of Esteban Ocon. So he did do well in that sense, but he was lucky there wasn't more cars backing up at that final corner than there were. And he almost, bottled it with going off at turn 2 and 3 on that outlap on very cold soft compound tyres. Then once we got to Q3, he completely destroyed the field, as he's done so many times this year. He just pulls out a lap, which you look at and think, how on earth is that even possible? I know that car's so good, but how has he pulled out a lap that is that far ahead of his teammate, for example? And in the first run in Q3, he was 0.8 of a second ahead of Valtteri Bottas, that historically is excellent around this circuit. So to do that in your first run in Q3 is... time describe how good that is, and then went on to further improve his lap time in the final run of Q3 and do the new track record and be on pole position by an absolute mile. Congratulations to Lewis Hamilton. It's his 96th pole position, and well, as long as he holds on to the lead at the start of the Grand Prix, he's going to win the race, because that car is probably the best Formula 1 car of all time. It's basically perfect. Valtteri Bottas, though, I'm sorry, today was very poor. Very similar, though, to what he did last year at this same circuit, where we were hyping him up about how this is such a great track for Valtteri Bottas, and that he's going to be so good. And then if you look at last year, in comparison to what he did to Lewis Hamilton in terms of pace, again, it was very similar. He was very slow and quite poor. And today, P3, considering how good that car is, and how good he normally is around this circuit, is absolutely terrible. And I mean, people may say that's the final nail on the coffin when it comes to the World Championship. I think the final nail on the coffin happened before this weekend, to be honest, and we'll get onto that probably, I don't know, in another video or later on. But Valtteri Bottas today just wasn't good enough. He should have got P2. Yes, P3 is not a bad position to start from, I know that. Of course, last year, Sebastian Vettel went from P3 to P1 at the start. I'm not doubting that it could be a great thing for him to start from P3, but, you're relying on a lot to go well for you for that to happen. And, if, as I said a moment ago, Valtteri Bottas, compared to Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri will be on the medium compound tyres when Lewis Hamilton, at the start, is on the soft. Now, even though Valtteri will have a slipstream on Lewis Hamilton will have the initial better grip and getaway being on the softer tyres. So, I mean, Valtteri's going to have just a rocket ship start if he's going to inflict the pain on Lewis Hamilton that he has to, if he's, going to somehow win the Grand Prix. But honestly, today, Valtteri, I thought, was quite poor. And I think tomorrow, I mean, yeah, he has to hope that starting from P3 really does work again, like it did for Vettel last year. And of course, for Valtteri in 2017, where he won this Grand Prix after starting P3 and then overtaking 2 Ferraris down into turn 2. But even if he gets ahead of Lewis Hamilton, do we trust that he's going to stay there? I mean, I know it's hard to overtake in Formula 1. Definitely very hard to overtake, your teammate who's in the same machinery. But Lewis Hamilton is driving at such a good level right now. I just don't see how Valtteri Bottas wins the Grand Prix tomorrow. So, I mean, yeah, the start tomorrow is going to be very exciting. It will be very important to the race result, as we'll get onto in a moment with Red Bull and later with Racing Point, who are also got a car in that top 4, which could make the start tomorrow very interesting. But as long as Lewis Hamilton doesn't have a disaster at the start, I think Lewis Hamilton's going to win the race. Even if he is second at the end of the first lap, I still think he'll find a way because it's Lewis Hamilton in that car. So I'm afraid if you are a Valtteri Bottas fan or a Red Bull fan, it is not looking good because I just think this man on screen is way too good right now, way too good to let his guard down and let anyone else win the Grand Prix. Let me see what you guys think, though, in the chat when it comes quickly to Mercedes. I'm not going to spend too much time on Mercedes because, let's be honest, it is a bit predictable now, isn't it? With Mercedes being at the front every single Grand Prix, and we know what the result is going to be, basically, every Grand Prix, especially when Lewis Hamilton is the one leading that team forward. Let's have a look. Ewok. Great to see, mate. Very poor from Bottas. Bottas will have a better race. He probably will have a better race, but I kind of feel as though he'll have a better race because of the car he's in, rather than him, doing any better. And if you look at this year, Valtteri his best performances has been in qualifying rather than the race. There's been a couple races where I thought he's done well, and he's been unlucky. For example, the second Silverstone race, I thought he was quite unlucky, even though, yeah, for the team it was quite a bad race. I still thought he was unlucky. And then the first Grand Prix of the season, I thought he drove very well. But Valtteri does tend to be at his best in qualifying. And that's why you feel with Valtteri a lot of the time that if he's going to beat Lewis Hamilton, he has to out-qualify Lewis Hamilton. Because if he doesn't out-qualify Lewis Hamilton, he tends to lose to him basically every time. I mean, it's very rare that Valtteri Bottas beats Hamilton after being out-qualified by him in a Grand Prix weekend, so it's not looking great, honestly, for him. Ronan Brady, Hamilton barely have to break a sweat to beat him. I think in qualifying he does. I think people do underestimate Valtteri Bottas in qualifying. He's very, very quick in qualifying, and I think if you ask Lewis Hamilton, he'll tell you that. In qualifying, he is a very, very quick driver. But in the race, certainly it's a lot easier to beat him because Valtteri just can't maintain that level of speed consistently like Lewis Hamilton can or other drivers on the grid can. So, yeah. Again, great starting position, but only if he gets to start, straight away from the grid that is necessary to carry out, what he should do down to the first corner, or the first real corner. Nib in the chat. Great to see you, mate. Says Bottas has just gone backwards this year. Yeah, he has. I thought end of last year at certain races like Suzuka and Kota, he was very, very good. That was the Valtteri Bottas that needed to be on track this season for, say, 75, 80% of the time at least. And if it was, then we probably would have seen a proper title fight, but Valtteri this season hasn't actually been that strong. Again, the first race, he was strong. The second Silverstone race, the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, I thought he was strong, but other than that, he's not really done enough to really put himself in a real conversation of can he win the World Championship in 2020. So, yeah, not good for Valtteri Bottas, and I mean, he has to hope, considering he's starting alongside Sergio Perez, even if he does get a good start, he has to hope that Perez doesn't get an even better one, because that Racing Point in a straight line is very, very quick, and I wouldn't be surprised if Perez could get into, say, second place somehow at the start of the Grand Prix. But I think now let's get on to Red Bull Racing. So, Max Verstappen, second on the grid. Who saw that coming? I didn't. I thought Max Verstappen would probably be P5, P6, to be honest, because I didn't think Red Bull, considering the characteristics of their car this season, I didn't think that, what they have with their car would actually really work around this circuit like it has maybe at Silverstone or even Mugello. I just didn't think Red Bull would really do anything, major, I guess, in qualifying. But Max Verstappen, what a lap. I know he did have a very nice slipstream from Valtteri Bottas after Valtteri completed his final lap because Verstappen went out very late for his final run. That did help, but he still had to put together two, the second and third sectors. He had to put together two very good sectors to get himself into that position. And second on the grid is a great result considering how the last couple races have gone for Verstappen and Red Bull. Alex Albon, though, just really poor. Really, really poor. Albon has just been terrible, really, all weekend. I haven't watched really any practice from this weekend's Grand Prix, but what I saw at qualifying, he could never really get anywhere really near his teammate Max Verstappen. And to be, 1.2 seconds or 1.1 seconds off in qualifying, that is simply not good enough. And now, I know people will say, and they are right in saying this because it is true, it's a fact that Alex Albon does not have the same car as Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen's car is better developed. And I agree, and yeah, it is a fact. But, like I kind of said with Gasly last year, towards the end of his Red Bull reign, their cars might not be the same, but that still doesn't explain that big of a gap. If it was half a second or 0.6 or even 0.7 of a second, then yeah, you can say, well, it's not the same car. You can't really, go in too hard on Albon. But, 1.1, 1.2 seconds, P10, that's just terrible. And considering how Gasly has performed this year, and I know Red Bull are going to basically keep Alex Albon for next year because now he's got his first podium and he has kind of improved this year based on how he did, I think, at the end of last year. But yeah, just 1.2 seconds. That's too much lap time, I'm afraid. But at least for Red Bull, Max Verstappen P2. That's the thing with Verstappen, and like we've said with the start of the Grand Prix, considering it isn't always the best place to start from, the front row of the grid. Even though he's qualified second, he could very well end up P4, P5 at the end of the first lap because you've got Perez fourth, Ricciardo fifth, and those two cars are very quick down the straights here in Russia. So even though he's qualified second, he's going to be under threat a lot. Unless he gets just a mega start straight away from the grid. And that's really his only hope to at least maintain the position he's got at the moment, which is second for the Grand Prix. For Albon, at the start, I mean, the only thing he can really do is just make sure he doesn't have a crash, because that has been very common at this circuit at the start of a Grand Prix. Let me clear my throat a moment. Been very common at the start of a Grand Prix here in Russia for there to be a crash, quite a big crash at the start. For example, 2015, 2016, 2017 there was there in 2018? I can't remember, but there was in 2015 and 2016. So, with him starting in the middle of the pack, he has to make sure he doesn't get involved in any shenanigans. And then after that, I mean, we know how good he is in the races compared to what he could do in qualifying. We've seen that this season. I mean, look at the races at Silverstone, the race in Hungary, where he had really bad qualifying sessions compared to what his teammate was doing, and then came through and got quite a good result, considering where he started from. So, yeah, just hope he survives, really, on the first lap, and then go from there. But it's not going to be as easy as we know to overtake around this track as it is in Silverstone or even Hungary, because this track is very hard to overtake. If you don't overtake on the main straight, then it's going to be very, very hard to overtake. I mean, I know you have a DRS straight in the middle of the lap, but you've got to be very close behind coming onto that middle DRS straight, because, I mean, you've got so many 90-degree corners before then. It's very hard to stay close enough to the car ahead. So, tough race for Albon, but for Max Verstappen, yeah, just hope he doesn't get swamped at the start, because we know the Red Bull in a straight line has been suffering this season compared to Renault, Mercedes, of course, Racing Point, McLaren. So, if the start goes well, Max should be in for a podium. Where on the podium he finishes, I don't know. And of course, he does start on the medium compound tyre, so that will be something he has over Lewis Hamilton if they get into a bit of a race at the start. And that'll be something Verstappen will have in his back pocket that he can utilise later on in the first stint. Let's look at what you guys are saying in the chat. Get Perez in that car. I've heard those rumours about Sergio Perez, but it's not going to happen because Red Bull don't put non-academy drivers in the car. This has been the way since they put Vettel in the Red Bull in 2009. I mean, the last driver who was not from the academy and put in the Red Bull team was Mark Webber in 2007. So it's not going to happen. It's going to be Verstappen and Albon, and then at AlphaTauri, it's going to be what, Gasly and either Kvyat or is it Tsunoda, the driver in F2, who is, I believe, a part of the Honda program. But yeah, it's not going to be, Perez at Red Bull. To be honest, if Red Bull weren't so strict in picking only academy drivers for their team, then Perez would be probably the best option out of Perez and Albon. Whether it be the best option out of Perez, Albon, and Gasly, that's a different debate. But Perez is better than Alex Albon. I don't think that's up for debate. I don't think that's up for debate at all. Red Bull Championship years were a young talent plus an experienced driver. They need to get back to that. I think, to be honest, they need to sort their car out first. I mean, yeah, it's great having a great driver lineup as we see at Ferrari. But if your car is shit, what do you expect the drivers to do? Max Verstappen is definitely at least the second best driver on the grid. He's definitely up there with Lewis Hamilton on certain days. If the car's not good enough, he's not going to be able to win. So even if you have Verstappen and Vettel, I know, of course, Vettel has gone to Aston Martin, but let's say when Vettel left Ferrari, he decided to go back to Red Bull. If the car, the Red Bull car is still not capable of competing with Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes, and, even if it's a great lineup, you can't expect them to do anything. And in Formula One, again, as you've seen at Ferrari, you can have the best driver lineup you want. If your car's bad, then it doesn't really matter how good your drivers are. You need to sort your car out first before you start going for superstar drivers or good experienced drivers over, say, less good younger drivers. They need to sort their car out first, because this Red Bull car, as I'll get onto in a video that I'm going to be putting out soon, which I'll get onto later on as to when it will come out, this Red Bull car is simply not good enough. It's not as good as it should have been this season. Red Bull and Honda know that. And this Red Bull car has been disappointing. It's not been terrible, but it's been disappointing. It's not been quite what it needed to be in 2020. KB, I'd like to see Kvyat in the Red Bull. He may not be great, but I think he'll be better than Gasly and Albon in the Red Bull. If they were going to put him in the Red Bull, that would have happened at the summer break last year, when it probably should have happened. But, yeah, that's the decision that was made. And now Gasly's the best out of the three. Out of him, Albon, and Kvyat. And who would have saw that coming? Not me. I thought Gasly would, in 2020, after, the way he ended 2019 and that just fucking brilliant podium he got in Brazil, I thought he would have a decent season, but I didn't think he would do what he did, winning the Italian Grand Prix. I mean, does it get any better than that in that car for that team? I don't think it does. So, yeah, just a weird, really weird year. But let's get on to the most entertaining Formula One team on the grid. The circus that has been traveling all around Europe since the start of July, going to Austria, going to Hungary, going to the United Kingdom, to Spain, to Belgium, to 2 separate locations in Italy, and now to Russia. The greatest circus act there is, without a doubt, and a team that has provided such brilliant entertainment and has not disappointed on the fantastic year it had last year. And that, of course, is Scuderia Ferrari. What a day today it was for Ferrari. 11th and 15th. I don't think it could have gone any better. It's better than what they did at Spa. 13th and 14th, or Monza, which was, 13th and 17th. But, an unbelievable day today for Ferrari. 11th for Charles Leclerc. To be honest, that's the best they could do. And in all seriousness, that's the best Charles Leclerc could do, because that car was not worthy of a top 10 slot. It just wasn't. And then Sebastian Vettel, of course, had another dramatic loss of rear end grip, which is the most common sight ever now, isn't it? Sebastian Vettel spinning. Yeah, a great day, wouldn't you say, guys, for Ferrari? Spinning into oblivion, as they normally do. But I think let's get a bit more serious. So, yeah, Leclerc 11th, obviously not good enough considering it's Ferrari. We all know the fucking story. But considering how the car is this year, I don't think, again, as I said a minute ago, Leclerc could have done any better. Sebastian Vettel 15th. What can you say? He's probably going to start at the back because, of course, he went rear end in first into the barriers. So, yeah, he's probably going to start at the back with a gearbox penalty. And if you want to see that crash, here you go. I will say for Ferrari, I mean, they really do care about the entertainment of us fans, because not only did Vettel spin and crash, Leclerc then put the cherry on top of the cake by running straight over Vettel's front wing, as if it could get any better. But yeah, Vettel's spin, in all seriousness, very weird. And this Ferrari car, as we know from this season, fundamentally is absolutely shit. But the way this car crashes is not even right. If you look at Leclerc's crash, for example, at the Italian Grand Prix, where he got oversteer and went into the barriers very hard, it was a weird crash, because normally what that car did when he went into the barriers at the Parabolica, normally cars don't do that. Normally cars have enough rear end grip. These, 2020 Formula One cars, normally they have enough rear end grip to go through that corner just about okay. But Leclerc's car, he put the throttle on, and then it just all of a sudden collects oversteer, and then he's having a massive crash in the barriers. Same thing with Sebastian Vettel. So the entry to turn 4, if you don't know, what the corner is kind of like if you are new to Formula One. So you go through the flat, far left-hander turn 3, and then as you come to turn 4, what you do is you position your car as far to the left as possible to give yourself the best entry, of course, for the right-hander of turn 4. And I think Vettel was doing that. But then, as he got to the apex, the rear end just said, nah, sorry, mate, I can't do that. And then he went spinning round into the barriers, and then, yeah, Leclerc ran into his front wing. It's such a weird spin. Normally, at that corner, you would expect cars to have an issue on the exit, not the entry. Normally, the exit can be a bit, hard if you go too wide. And I think you can see there's an orange sausage cup there. So if you go a bit wide onto that, maybe you can have a bit of a moment. I think Jolyon Palmer did that once. But to be honest, for Jolyon Palmer, he did many things in Formula One that weren't good. But crashing on the entry there is not a common sight. It's not at all. It was a very weird spin. And yeah, that's what led to Sebastian Vettel qualifying in 15th place, which is, of course, very bad for him. But if you look at Vettel this season, this is not a surprise to him, this lack of rear-end grip. I mean, there was a clip going around on social media of the first race of the season, and it was like lap 10 of the race, and the first 3 corners, the first proper 3 corners in Austria, the heavier braking zones, after the 3 DRS straights, Sebastian Vettel, I think even into the middle sector as well, every time Vettel braked and turned into those corners, the rear end was trying to come round every single time, and he almost spun 3 or 4 times in a lap. And that was just on some mediocre lap in the Grand Prix, where he wasn't really close to a car ahead or under pressure from a car behind. So it's not a surprise for Sebastian Vettel, but it's just so weird how this car just... like the way it spins, it's so unpredictable and violent. There's no predictability to it. You can't see it coming before it does happen. It just happens. And it's, how can you drive this type of car if you're Leclerc or Sebastian Vettel? How can you drive a car like this to the absolute maximum you want to when the thing could pivot and hit the wall very hard at any moment? That's just how bad the car is. Let's not get onto the straight line speed. Not get onto the straight line speed at all of that Ferrari car. It's horrific. It's not even a word to describe it. But yeah, 11th and 15th, that's the best they could do. And for the race tomorrow, they're not going to finish in the points, are they? I mean, the only way they can is if someone ahead of them has a crash or retires from the race. That's how bad it is at Ferrari, that's their only real way of getting points is through others' misfortune. I mean, look at the last race in Mugello a couple weeks ago, for example. The only reason Ferrari scored points, and it was 3 points or 5 points, 8th and 10th, I think it was. The only reason they scored points was because so many cars retired from the race, and they were under pressure just to score those 5 points from Kimi Räikkönen, who was actually ahead of them on track but got a 5-second time penalty for, I can't remember what it was. And then Russell almost beat Vettel to a point. I mean, he was chasing him down hard in a fucking Williams. A Williams car that last year was so far off the pace. Ferrari were lapping that car not even once. They were lapping it 2 or 3 times. Now they're trying to hold them off for a fucking point at their track that they own and their 1000th Grand Prix. I mean, how bad can it get? Yeah, the only way, again, similar to Mugello, the only way they can score points is if other cars retire from the race. They're not as quick, of course, as Mercedes. They're not as quick as Red Bull or Racing Point. And then there is actually a Racing Point starting behind Leclerc and Lance Stroll. And Lance Stroll will beat him. And I think Stroll would have got into the top 10 had it not been for a car problem he had before the final run in Q2. And then, Renault, they're faster. McLaren are faster. Alfa Tauri are faster. And there's an Alfa Tauri behind Leclerc on the track. In Kvyat, I think in 13th place. And then, even if you look at the last couple races, Ferrari have not even been as quick as Alfa Romeo at certain times. Look at the race at Spa and Monza and even Mugello, even though Raikkonen got a penalty. The highest placed Ferrari car on track was Kimi Räikkönen in an Alfa Romeo, a customer car. So, yeah, this team is basically just a non-story at the moment. But guys, let me know in the live chat what you think of Ferrari. I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say. And if you want to ask me anything when it comes to the Ferrari as to what should happen and any of that, then go ahead and ask, and I'll try and give the best answer I can. I don't want to go too in depth with this team because I do have a video planned which does cover them a bit. That's coming up soon, and I don't want to I guess, blow my load when it comes to everything I have to say when it comes to this team. So let me know what you think about this team, this awful, awful team. And as it says there on the lower ticker there, Ferrari have both cars knocked out in Q2 in Russia for the first time. And remember, last year they had pole position by almost half a second. This year, they can't even get within, what, a second and a half? So, yeah. Let's see what you guys have to say. Spinella, yes. Can I ask, have you guys seen that clip of Claire Williams being asked to say that certain word? Very, very funny clip. And don't worry, we'll get on to that whole Williams situation later on, but that was quite funny. JB, Seb's face after he crashed was so painful. This thing with Vettel, does he even care anymore? Does he even give a fuck? Because if I was Vettel, I wouldn't care because, you know, he's been dumped by the team. He's leaving. He knows the car's this bad. I mean, it's not a surprise anymore. Kind of reminds me of, say, Kimi Räikkönen in like 2009, or Kimi Räikkönen in, say, when would it have been? Not 2013, but like kind of like with McLaren in 2006, where he kind of accepted, you know, he's done with the team he's at, and he just doesn't care anymore. And you can see by the way he's giving interviews, you can see by the way, you know, how he's driving and all. He just doesn't care anymore because the team doesn't care about him. I mean, they can't even give him a face mask that actually works properly. So if the team don't care about him, then why should he give a fuck anymore? Ronan Brady Leclerc is not really anywhere near as good as the media and the Ferrari management think. I reckon Sainz will beat him next year. I disagree. I think Leclerc is a very good driver, but I think actually the media might be underestimating how good Carlos Sainz is. And I think Sainz will be very good next year, only if the Ferrari car is better. But we already heard from the boss of Ferrari that it's the same for next year. So get ready for the completion of the trilogy of misery. 2019, 2020, and then 2021. KB. It's all part of the great Ferrari master plan. I'm sure it is. Francisco says, I thought he attacked the curbs too hard. I don't think it was that. I think if you look at the clip, the car was already spinning. Well, once he got to the apex, really. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't know if it's because he took such a wide turn in, but with these cars, that is to be expected in terms of what the car can handle. So you can't say Vettel asked too much of a Formula 1 car. Maybe he asked too much of a Ferrari Formula 1 car, but you know what I mean? What he was asking the car to do with his driving was very reasonable. Let's be honest. I don't think Vettel cares anymore. Yeah, I agree. I don't think he cares. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the Alfa Romeos beats the Ferraris again. Yeah. I mean, who's the highest place Alfa? Is it Giovinazzi in 17th? If Raikkonen was in 17th, I'd probably say he would, but Antonio's been quite poor in the races, so maybe they'll beat them this weekend. Maybe. Just maybe. They regard exactly. Vettel was being chased by Williams. I was there watching the race a couple of weeks ago. Very long race because it wouldn't fucking end, would it? With red flags and safety cars. But when they were showing at the end Russell catching a Ferrari, I was like, if you told me a year ago this would be happening, I would have said that there is that not even 0% chance of happening, like minus 1,000. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. How? How do you lose that much speed in a year? Not even a year. In 4 months. I mean, we know why, but still, for it to happen for a team like this, it's like, how? How does that happen? Cyber Trader, what is the outlook for 2021? For Ferrari, it's the same, isn't it? They're just gonna be the same. 5th, 6th in the constructors at best. In the midfield. Yeah. I mean, the only thing they can really do at the moment is just wait and hope that the 2022 car is... I mean, it's not going to be the best car on the grid. I don't see Ferrari going from where they are now, 6th, 7th to top. I don't see that happening at all. But, I mean, the only thing they can really do is make sure they're back in a position to actually have the pace, be on the podium or win races like they were last year. But the next year and a half, I guess, if you're a Ferrari fan, you need to literally expect the worst, because if you expect anything of this team in a positive, like they should finish in this position in the top 10, they're probably not going to. That's just how bad they are now. Let's have a look. Final ones, because I've just realized I spent a lot of time on Ferrari. It's what they get for cheating. As well, when it comes to why Ferrari are so slow this season, in case anyone is wondering, as new to Formula One the last year or so, and they're wondering, how Ferrari gone from being able to win races in 2019 and should have won more races, to now they're being lapped basically every race, and in races they're not lapped, it's only because of safety cars and red flags. The reason is because the aerodynamic side that we criticised so much last year has not improved at all. It's not got worse, but it's not got better. So it's basically the same as it was last year. And the car does have a higher drag concept, because they tried to copy the Red Bull concept of having, a lower rake, I think. And that's a concept. If I'm wrong, then let me know. But they tried to go for that, and that hasn't worked. And that's why aerodynamically they're basically the same as last season. The biggest reason they are so slow is because the power unit of last year that was producing, as we know, illegal levels of power, they had to get rid of and install this power unit, which is now, I guess you can say, law-abiding by the FIA law for Formula One when it comes to what you're allowed to do with the engines and so on and so forth. And because they've lost all of that speed that they had in a straight line, that's why now they are in the position they are in now. But I want to stress people thinking, well, if they had the power from last year, even though it was illegal, if they had the power from last year, then they'd be back to where they were last year. Wrong. If you say give them back that power they had, they still would be, 6-7 tenths of a second probably at best off Mercedes. I mean, that's how good the new Merc 2020 is. So yeah, it's not just power. It's power. The grip hasn't improved. The driving from Leclerc, I think, has improved. The driving from Sebastian Vettel hasn't, but that's not really to do with him. It's to do with the car being not what he likes in terms of the setup, and also the strategy that he gets put on in certain races is just so stupid you can't even comprehend. I mean, what happened in Spain was disgraceful, where they started him on the medium, he went very long into the Grand Prix, then put him on the soft compound tyre, Then Vettel, of course, on the soft, because it's the softest tyre, he's going to push a bit harder because it's the softest tyre. It's a lot fresher than the other cars ahead. He's going to try and get after those other cars. And then suddenly, with what, 15 laps to go? Oh, Seb, do you think you can go to the end? And then no wonder he responded with, why didn't you tell me earlier? Because if they told him earlier, he could have saved his tyres and he may have, not finished where he did. He may have finished a position higher. But no, just, all casual. Hey, Seb, do you think you can go to the end on the softest compound tyre that you're going to, have had on for 30 laps? Like, what kind of thinking gets you to that point? You're going to do a one-stop race. Have that plan, before the race. Don't just be like, we're just going to try anything and whatever works, works. And that's basically what Ferrari's strategy has become now. And you saw at the end of last year where they're so bad at strategy and they're so unconfident in themselves in picking the right time to pit, the right tyres to go onto. They are literally throwing shit against a wall and seeing what sticks. And whatever sticks, they'll go with. But if it doesn't stick, then they'll just do, they'll try anything, even if it's the worst strategy of all time. I mean, look at the race in Mugello before the second red flag. They were just pitting Leclerc any time his tyres went off, which was, 2 or 3 times? And that's why Leclerc ended up, back down in 11th, 12th, or 10th by the time the second red flag came out. Just as a team, the whole thing is a complete disaster. Right, let me read a couple final comments and then we'll get to the rest of the teams because I've spent way too much time on Ferrari. Let me read this comment from Henry O'Boyle. Perfect metaphor, Chaz, as even the shit that sticks is still shit. Exactly. That's one thing I've always had a criticism of this team for, is I have no problem with you going for a strategy that may not work out as long as you've planned to do that in advance. If you've gone into the race saying, right, this is what we're going to do with this car. We're going to pit on this lap or around this lap onto this tyre and go to the end. The problem with Ferrari is they don't have a plan going into the race. They literally go into the race and react either to other teams or react to their drivers saying, yeah, my tyres are dead, please pit me. And then they respond 5 laps later when it's too late and they've lost another 10 seconds. That's not strategy. That's not a plan. That's just, again, throwing shit against the wall. That's, letting others do it for you. You need to have a plan before the race every time because you can't rely on safety cars or other teams pitting and then that's your signal to pit or waiting for the drivers to say the tyres are dead. You've got to have a plan, or at least, we know teams have, 2 plans, 3 plans? Ferrari, they claim to have plans, but I don't think they do at all. I think in Mugello, as Leclerc was falling back through the field, they came on the radio and said, I think they even said, we're on plan C or we're thinking about plan C. Like, what are they doing? What are they doing? And by the way, when they say plan C, that's not a plan they had before the race. I can guarantee you that. That's just, oh, your tyres are dead. Let's pit and try something. That's all that is. Right, I think. And yeah, Francisco says, why is Rueda still there? I'm not going to speculate what he's done to get that job or keep that job, but I think we all know what he's done. Yeah, let's move on from Circus. I wish Bonotto a very good day tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be a great race. Racing the absolute balls off to finish ahead of the Williamses. Yeah, let's go to Renault. So, Renault this season are a lot faster than I thought they would be. And they're a lot faster now than they were at the start of the season, where they were basically where they were at the end of last season, which is like back end of the top 10. But Renault, considering how Renault went at the power circuits of Spa and Monza and kind of Mugello as well, I think Renault have every right to be disappointed in today's result, because Ricciardo was looking very strong at the end of Q2. After the first run of Q3, he was looking like he could get P3 even on the grid. He looked very quick, and if he did improve his final lap, he may have been P2, P3, who knows? But he ended up P5, because again, he didn't improve that final run. Verstappen went faster. He was ahead of him, but he was only slightly ahead of him after that first run in Q3. And then Perez got ahead of him because he did, a very good final run. And again, Ricciardo didn't improve his final lap. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because that first lap in Q3 was the best that Renault have. I don't know. Or if, Daniel just didn't hook it up as well. I don't know, but I think he will be slightly disappointed with P5. The reason I say slightly is because, again, at the start of this race, with a slipstream down to the first braking zone, he could easily, reverse that into a P3, just like that. So it might work out yet, but I think in terms of, if you just look at qualifying on its own, considering how quick they've been, I think he'll be disappointed with that. But Ricciardo, I've got to say, you could say all season, maybe. I mean, he did have a retirement in the first race, so we can't really say where he would have finished in that first race. But you could say that all season long, Daniel Ricciardo has been one of the best drivers on the grid. I mean, that second race in Austria, he did very well, considering, again, the Renault car wasn't quite up to speed yet. And he was hampered by just the inability to make a clear instruction to Esteban Ocon to move the fuck out of the way for Daniel Ricciardo when Ricciardo was faster and on harder tyres. And then Hungary, he finished in, was it P8, I think, in that race? And then Silverstone, the first race, he was very close to a podium. If there was 2 or 3 more laps, well, considering Hamilton's puncture, if there was one more lap after that last lap, Ricciardo would have got on the podium. Just like that. And he was right up behind Charles Leclerc at the end of that race as well. He was struggling on his tyres. Then qualifying in the second Silverstone race was good, but the race itself was quite disappointing. The pace just wasn't there. I think they pit him also at the wrong time, and then of course he had that spin. And then the Spanish Grand Prix, there's nothing he could do. Renault was just shit. And then Spa, he was probably the best driver out of that midfield pack during that weekend, and one of the best drivers that weekend. Qualified in P4, was consistently in P4 with no threat from behind, and got the fastest lap. And if there'd been 2 or 3 more laps, he may have got a podium again. Then the race at Monza. I think Ricciardo, if that first safety car didn't come out and then the red flag, I think Daniel Ricciardo could have got a podium, because he was in a very strong position right behind, I think it was Norris and Perez. I mean, he was only like 2 or 3 seconds behind Norris. So I think he was in a strong position for a podium there. But then how it all worked out, he couldn't really get back into that position when, to be honest, he was driving very well. And then Mugello, I honestly thought he was going to do it. I thought he was going to get the podium, and then Albon, just out of nowhere, comes up behind him, overtakes him, and pulls away clearly from him and gets a podium. So disappointing that Ricciardo has been so close to a podium yet so far. But I think if you look at just how he's driven this season, Daniel Ricciardo has been great. He really has, and he's proven why he is still easily one of the top 10 on the grid and quite close to top 5 on the grid. This season, he does deserve a podium, and I hope he does get a podium before the end of the year, because he really does deserve it. And I think he will. I don't think he'll be this weekend. I think it'll probably be at one of those races at Bahrain, probably the second one where they're on the more flat out oval type track. I think he'll get a podium there, but I think he does absolutely deserve one. He's been great. But Esteban Ocon, who today qualified in, was it 7th place in the Renault? If you look at today on its own, I mean, I think that's a good result. Wasn't that far behind Ricciardo. But I think if you look at Ocon this season, I kind of predicted it, that he wouldn't start off well, but he would finish well. And if you look at the start of this season, he didn't start well at all. He had a good qualifying in that wet qualifying for the Styrian Grand Prix. But except for that, he didn't really do anything that big in those first 3 races. The first Silverstone race, he did well. The Renault car was quick, but he did do well to finish in, I think, 6th place in that Grand Prix. And then, not Spanish Grand Prix, the Belgian Grand Prix, did very well to pass Albon on the final lap to get P5. Big points for Renault in that fight for P3 in the Constructors. And then Monza, he was disappointed with the result he got. And then Mugello, nothing really happened for him because of the retirement he had in the race. But it's got better slowly for Ocon, but I still feel as though, considering the hype behind Esteban Ocon from a couple years ago, that this season has been underwhelming. If Esteban Ocon was as good as people claimed he was, after those first couple years at Force India / Racing Point, then why aren't we seeing it? Because even though Daniel Ricciardo is a very good driver, if Esteban Ocon wants to be at the top of Formula 1, or near the top of Formula 1, you've got to be right there with Daniel Ricciardo and beating him on certain races. He hasn't this year. Ricciardo has been clearly the better driver. So, even though Ocon, as the year has gone on, has improved, again, considering the hype, and considering that F1 last year wanted him to replace Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes, you have to say he's been quite underwhelming. But for Renault, in qualifying, not bad. Could have been better though. But the race, I think, considering how Renault normally are when it comes to tyre wear, I think you could see Renault maybe get, say, P4, something like that. And I think they will be not too far off a podium. It will be interesting as well to see what they do at the start of the Grand Prix. Now, I'm not going to come to the chat right away for Renault. I'm going to go straight to McLaren. But before I go to McLaren, I think as you can hear, my throat is dying a very horrible fucking death. So let me just quickly clear my throat and have a drink because it feels very, very sore. And then we'll get to McLaren in just a moment. Oh, that feels so much better. Right. Let's get on to McLaren. I promise I'll read your comments out, certain comments about, Renault in a moment. Just want to get straight to McLaren. Of course, another Renault powered team. And today, kind of disappointing. Again, kind of like Renault. It could have been better. It definitely could have been better. I thought, honestly, coming into qualifying, and I think Carlos Sainz was actually in P3 in practice 3. I don't know if that is absolutely accurate, but I think he was, or he was very close to that position, say in P4. But I think McLaren, or I thought rather, McLaren coming into qualifying would end up getting into P3, P4. Obviously, I did expect Hamilton and Bottas to be 1 and 2, and then after that, I didn't think Red Bull would be that quick with Max Verstappen, so on and so forth. So, I was surprised today that McLaren won quite up there, because if you look at what they did last year at this circuit, they were quite strong. So I thought, considering where the pack is this year, they should be getting a car, at least one car in the top 5, and they didn't. So yeah, disappointing. Again, though, at the start, you never know that maybe they'll make up for that, but I think it was a disappointing qualifying session today. Only slightly, but I think it could have been better for sure for McLaren. But as we've seen this season, they've done so well at, somehow finishing with more points than they really should get. I mean, look at the second race in Austria, for example. With a few laps to go, they were, 8th and 9th? The two McLarens, and then Lando Norris goes up to 5th place and grabs vital points for McLaren in the Constructors. And they've done that so many times this year. They did that at Monza, for example, capitalizing on Red Bull, being unreliable but also not quick, and scoring, for them, loads of points considering what they've been like in the last few years. 2nd and 4th at that Grand Prix, and that was 30 points, which was a lot of points to be taking in that battle for 3rd in the Constructors, that they're really fighting hard against Racing Point and Renault, who are looking quick, and in fact looking quicker than them. But again, McLaren have been so good at still, at the end of the day, being maybe not on top of the midfield battle, but still scoring enough points to keep them either in 3rd, or even if they drop to 4th, still close, and they're still, maximizing what they can do. They're not underwhelming like maybe you could say Racing Point have a couple times this year. For example, with Racing Point, I thought they underwhelmed big time at Spa, where they were 8th and 9th, or 9th and 10th, something like that. I thought, they underwhelmed very hard at that track. McLaren haven't really done that, and I think that's why McLaren are in 3rd in the Constructors. Not because McLaren have the quickest midfield car. I don't think they do. I think McLaren probably have the 4th or 5th quickest car on the grid. But because they're so consistent, and their two drivers are consistent, and their two drivers are so quick, they're able to still score enough points to be right in there, which is kind of what they did at certain points of 2019 when they didn't have the best car in the midfield to still finish P4 in the Constructors. They somehow were still able to outscore their midfield rivals to get what they needed for the Constructors. And can they do that tomorrow? I mean, they've got the car to, they've got the drivers to. It all depends really on what they can do, I think, against Renault. I mean, Perez is kind of an outlier because I think he really did do a lot better, Perez, than the car is, kind of around this track. I think McLaren and Renault do have the two fastest midfield cars. Maybe you could say Red Bull don't have as quick of a car as Renault do, and maybe Max Verstappen was just that good today. But I think really McLaren's race tomorrow. I mean, of course, Sergio Perez, they'll be racing hard, but I think really they are racing Renault tomorrow. Because Renault are the team on the move in the Constructors. They're the team that scored the most points, I think, out of the top 3, or out of the midfield pack. They've scored the most points, I think, out of, McLaren, Racing Point, and Renault. And Renault really have clawed back a lot of ground that they gave up in the first 5 races, or 6 races even, because in Spain they didn't score a point at all, Renault. So, yeah, it's them versus Renault, which is very similar to last year, where they had plenty of races where it was them versus Renault. And plenty of times last year they came out on top. Sometimes this year they have come out on top, but Renault do have quite a bit quicker of a car than they did last year. So it's going to be a very hard, tough race, but with the drivers they have, I trust them 100% to do the best they can, even if it's not quite as good as maybe they were hoping for coming into the weekend. But Let's have a look, see what you guys have to say in regards to McLaren and also Renault. Nib says Ricardo has been having good starts recently, so watch out tomorrow. He did. Mugello, Monza, Spa. I mean, he maintained position? Or no, he didn't really maintain position. He did actually get very close to passing Verstappen. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Finally, 9 later, he has learned how to use the clutch. Right, let's find some other comments quick about Renault and McLaren. JB Ricardo has been consistently great. Last year, he probably struggled to adapt to the midfield, but now he's getting the most out of the car. I think the reason he struggled with the Renault is because simply it's, he can't brake as late. He can't, stamp on the throttle pedal as quickly and as hard out of a corner as he could in the Red Bull. And it does take time to get used to that at every single track. Because last year, he would have been going to each circuit thinking of what he was able to do in a Red Bull. And then in the Renault, a lot less capable of doing those certain things, braking very late and accelerating hard and early out of slow corners. In a midfield car, you've got to take it a lot more easier. And I think that's what it probably was, is just getting used to a car that slow compared to the Red Bull. And now this year, he's got used to it. And he has been one of the best performers this season. I don't think anyone can really deny that. Sainz had a lot of bad luck this year. He has. He really has. The first race, he should have got a podium. In terms of pace. Second race, he was looking good. And then he had a bad pit stop. And that's why he couldn't fight Stroll, Ricciardo, or his teammate. Or Sergio Perez. And then the first Silverstone race, he was on for P4, and then tyre failure. And then Spa, he didn't do the race because his car failed before he even got to the Grand Prix. And can't really say Monza he was unlucky. I don't think he was. I mean, yeah, maybe he could have, with what Hamilton had, maybe he could have won that race. But if Sainz had closed up to the back of Gasly quicker, I think Carlos Sainz would have won the race. The McLaren was definitely quicker than the AlphaTauri that weekend. So it was really down to how quickly Carlos Sainz closed in on Gasly at that race, and he didn't close in quick enough. If he closed in a lap or two quicker, I think Carlos Sainz would have won the Grand Prix, but he didn't. And he didn't, he didn't have a bad performance because of that. It was a very good performance, but if you're looking at, what he could have done better, I think that's the only thing you could have said when it comes to that race, is maybe he could have got up the back of him or within DRS a lap or two quicker, and then he would have got it done. And then Mugello, yeah, he was unlucky because he made a very good start, was about to overtake a racing point, and then a racing point made him spin, and then he had to pit because he had front wing damage, and then, of course, that massive crash at the safety car restart where he got just taken out, basically, by loads of other cars, I think. Meant he, retired from the race. But yeah, he's been very unlucky this season. I think people have underestimated, again, how good he is. Because once everything goes his way, he is better than Lando Norris. I don't think a large amount of people would deny that. Lando's been very good this season. He has improved on last season for sure. Definitely in the races, he has improved. His overtaking is just great. Pace and qualifying is good. Not as good as Carlos Sainz, I don't think, but it is good. But I think on their day, when everything's going their way for respective drivers, I do think Carlos Sainz still is the better driver. It's close, but I still think it's Carlos Sainz who's the better driver. Right, let me find one final comment here if I can. Henry Boyle, McLaren this year, 5th best car, but 3rd best team overall. Do you know what? Even though Red Bull is 2nd in the constructors, I wouldn't. Even though, yeah, they are 2nd in the constructors, I wouldn't say Red Bull have actually been better as a team than McLaren have been. The reason Red Bull is 2nd is simple: Max Verstappen. Without Max Verstappen, Red Bull would be in the midfield fighting McLaren, Renault, Ferrari, Racing Point. And at certain races, they have, because not even Max Verstappen could bail them out. That's why Red Bull was 2nd in the constructors. And if I look, let me have a quick look at the constructors, because Red Bull, even though they are 2nd, they're not that far ahead of McLaren, I don't think. Yeah, they're only... How many points is that? 67 points? I mean, that's comfortable. But, again, that's because of Max Verstappen. McLaren, I think, have been a better team. I think they've been more consistent. And I think they've just... In the races, they've just, done better in terms of getting the best result they could compared to Red Bull. Certain things Red Bull have done with Alex Albon, for example, I didn't like. So yeah, I think McLaren, I think they've been probably the 2nd best team this year, and then followed up by... It's tough to say Racing Point because of the car they've got, because they are benefiting a lot from that, but they have still done well certain races. But yeah, I'd say Mercedes and McLaren, I think, have been the 2 best teams this year. Then after that, it really is a debate. Let's get on to Racing Point. Look at this beautiful 2019 Mercedes car in pink. It just is a marvellous thing to see. Anyway, in all seriousness, Racing Point today with Sergio Perez. Very good result in P4. Not sure if he can get a podium. The start will be very important to that. If he can, like I said earlier, just be like an absolute rocket ship with that straight line speed he has, then he might be able even to get into the lead. We know how quick that car is in a straight line, and we know the slipstream effect is big down to the first braking zone. But I think really, or realistically, unless he does get an amazing start, Perez's race is the cars behind. Ricciardo, Carlos Sainz, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon. Those are the cars I think he is racing. But if he does get ahead of Max Verstappen at the start, or even ahead of Bottas and Verstappen, then he's in for a podium. But if he does, say, maintain P4, then yeah, he's going to be looking in his mirrors for the race, because I just don't think he'll be able to keep up with Max Verstappen, and obviously won't be able to keep up with the 2 Mercs. So yeah, it's him versus all the cars behind. But if you can get that great start, then game on. It really is game on. For Lance Stroll, though, I do feel sorry for him, because I think he was in for quite a decent qualifying. And then, yeah, he had a problem. I don't know what the problem was. But P12, because of that problem, he would have got into the top 10 because the car is quick enough. I don't know who he would have knocked out, because I don't know who was P10 in Q2. I don't know if it was Gasly in the Alpha Tauri. It might have been. But I do feel sorry for Stroll. Because, yeah, he probably would have been, what, P7, 8 probably? Somewhere around there, maybe P9 at worst. Yeah, for the race tomorrow, as long as he doesn't have to have a grid penalty, he should finish in the points and finish probably 8th at worst, and then at best, say P6. But I will say, Lance Stroll, I am probably going to make a video on this at some point, but I may as well just say it now. Lance Stroll has proved me wrong compared to what I thought about him in 2017 and 2018. And on this channel, because now thankfully I have my videos back, you can go and hear what I had to think about Lance Stroll back in 2018. I did not have a good opinion. I did say that he was good in the races when it came to starts and just generally doing better than he did in qualifying, but I didn't think there was really that much there with him. I didn't think there was enough there for him to be a properly capable enough midfield driver. But I've been proven wrong. Last year I was proven wrong some of the time, but this year I really have been. And yes, the car is good. I get it. But if you compare him to Sergio Perez, he's been good. He has been good. You can't deny that. Look at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Out-qualified him, out-raced him comfortably. And then you have races in Spain where even though he was out-qualified by Perez, he did out-race him. I know Perez had a penalty, which was a bullshit penalty, but Stroll was the faster driver, or the better driver in that race, I thought. Even though Perez, I did think, he did overtake, didn't he, Stroll, after his first and only pit stop. Stroll did pit twice, but I thought Stroll was very good in that Grand Prix. And then the Italian Grand Prix, of course, P3. Could have worked out better for Stroll. But yeah, P3, great result. Another podium. I think it actually goes overlooked considering how mental that race was with Alpha Tauri winning the race and McLaren second. Goes overlooked. I think quite a lot that was Racing Point's first podium since Baku 2018 and Lance Stroll's first podium since Baku 2017. But yeah, great drive there. And I actually think was very unlucky with the puncture in Mugello because he was heading for a decent result there. I think he was it P4 ahead of Albon and not far behind Ricciardo, might have got another podium. But then what happened. So yeah, I think Stroll, he's proven me wrong. He is definitely a capable midfield driver. There's no doubt about that in my mind anymore. Yes, qualifying, he is still a bit erratic, but he has improved quite a bit. He has had, I think, was it Juan Pablo Montoya as his mentor at times? No better mentor to have when it comes to getting the most out of your car in qualifying. I mean, if you see some of Montoya's qualifying laps back in the day, no wonder they used to call him the monster, because he was monstrous in some of those laps. At being somehow getting pole position when it seemed literally impossible, competing against Michael Schumacher at the absolute height of Ferrari's dominance. That's how good Montoya was in qualifying. So, great mentor for that. And it looks as though he has improved in that area. I don't think, though, I still don't think he deserves to be in that team ahead of Sergio Perez for next year when they become Aston Martin. But forgetting that, he absolutely deserves to be in Formula 1. He absolutely deserves to be in the midfield. I don't think he deserves to be in a top car quite yet, but he is absolutely, without a doubt in my mind, a capable and good enough midfield Formula 1 driver. And yeah, he's proven me wrong. I never thought I'd say it because I thought that he would turn out to be kind of Marcus Ericsson-ish. Ericsson's not a bad driver, but as you can see in IndyCar, he's not that good. But no, Stroll's proven me wrong. He has. And I am, man enough to admit when I'm wrong, and I'm wrong. Or was wrong. He is good enough. No doubt about it. Now, when it comes to Sergio Perez, I do feel sorry for Sergio Perez because, with the COVID, testing positive for COVID and missing 2 races, that really did hamper his chances of putting, a case out for him somehow being in the team alongside Sebastian Vettel and kicking Stroll out. But to be honest, there was no real chance of Stroll getting kicked out because we know who the owner and the person who's running the team is. We know. So we knew that Stroll was not going to get kicked out even if Stroll was shit this season. But yeah, I do feel sorry for Perez because things just haven't gone his way. The first race of the season, he could have got a podium, but he didn't. Second race of the season, he was so quick coming through the field, and he should have got 4th if it wasn't for a minor contact with Albon in the Red Bull. And then Hungary probably was the only race where you could say he wasn't really that good. Then he missed the 2 races at Silverstone, which is a shame for him because that track does tend to be quite a strong track for him. He's had quite a few points finishes there. And then the Spanish Grand Prix, good result. Spa, he drove well considering the strategy he was on after that safety car came out. Monza, he could have got a podium if the safety car didn't come out for Magnussen's car. And then at the last race, he was, I think, driving a car with parts that weren't as up-to-date as Stroll's car was, because, of course, Perez is not driving for them next year. So why would they put new parts on Perez's car? It doesn't make any sense from a team's point of view. If you look at this season, I don't think you can say Perez has been poor or not good enough. I just think he has been unlucky. And it's a shame. And I really, really hope he stays on the grid. And if Haas F1 have a fucking brain, they will kick the cookbook master himself, Roman Grosjean, out and put Perez in that car alongside Kevin Magnussen. Perez and Magnussen as a combo sounds good. Sounds a lot better than Magnussen and Grosjean. And yeah, Haas have got to do it. Look at what Perez has done in Formula 1. He has countless podiums in cars that shouldn't be on the podium. Very experienced. Still very good. He hasn't really got worse in his career. It's an obvious move. And I really hope for Sergio Perez's sake that is what happens. Because it has to. Because we have to keep him on the grid. He is absolutely good enough to be a Formula 1 driver. Let me just quickly, though, take a look at what you guys have to say about Racing Point quickly, and then we'll get to the final few teams. I was actually planning to do only an hour tonight, but we're nearly an hour and a half, so I am going to try and wrap up a bit quicker. Is Checo good for Red Bull? Well, he's better than Albon, but is he better than Gasly? That's the debate in terms of what we would do, because we know what Red Bull are going to do. Red Bull are going to keep Albon in the car, most likely. Or I think they have confirmed it, basically. So, again, if it was us deciding, then again, the debate would have to be Perez or Gasly, and that's a hard debate, because even though Gasly has been very good this season, Sergio Perez is also very good as well, and is more experienced and reliable. So it's a hard debate in certain areas. I would probably go Gasly. I know that's a surprise, considering I said that he needed to get dropped, and I still stand by that, by the way, as we'll get into in a moment. They did need to drop Gasly. He wasn't doing good enough. He wasn't confident. He had to get out of that situation. And he did. And it was the best thing for him, as we've seen. Because he's done more in a year at AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso than he did in 6 months at Red Bull. In a Red Bull car that was a lot faster. So he had to go. And again, look what he's done. But I don't think we can really talk about Perez and Red Bull, though, realistically. Because, again, is it going to happen? No, it's not. It's going to be either Gasly or Albon. Ewok says, Perez missed 2 races and is only 13 points behind Stroll. I think that proves that Perez has actually been good this year, but has been unlucky. And there's nothing he can really do about certain situations. I know people can say, oh, well, maybe he shouldn't have visited his mother because that's how he contracted it, apparently. But, you know, in this world, in this year, how are we supposed to tell what's going to happen fucking next? You can't. So I don't think you can really blame Perez for that. He's just been wrong place, wrong time. Let me have a quick look at one final comment. I have to, if I can find that Racing Point. Racing Point. Let me find one final one. Here we go. JB. Lance Stroll has been a genuinely solid driver this year. Yes, the car is much better, but he's been much closer to Perez. Exactly what I've said. And Nib says, and prove me right, because I remember Nib was saying at the end of last year, I think the start of this year as well, that as long as Stroll not completely sorts out his qualifying, because that's unrealistic to expect, but as long as he improved it enough and the car was better, then Stroll was going to prove himself, and he has. So yeah, you have absolutely Nib been proven right. And to be honest, I was kind of going in that direction with Stroll in terms of, actually he is good enough compared to what I thought when he was at Williams, when I think now in hindsight, the reason at Williams he wasn't good enough was inexperience. If he had spent 2017 and 2018 in F2 or F3, he probably, when he eventually came into Formula 1, whenever that may have been, 2018 maybe or 2019, he would have been a lot stronger and a lot better for it. But Williams needed the money, and Stroll was a good talent, so they went with him. Even though in hindsight, it was probably a year to a year and a half too early. So I think in hindsight, yeah, we can see why Stroll struggled. Yeah, he got a podium in his first year, but if you look in comparison to Felipe Massa that year, he was very slow, and that was because simply he wasn't ready for Formula 1. He was probably ready for Formula 1, say, halfway through 2018 was probably when he was personally at a level to be ready. And yeah, now clearly you can see he is a good enough driver. Right. Let's get on to AlphaTauri quickly. So, yeah, Gasly qualified. Let me just actually look. Where did he qualify? P9. Yeah, Gasly P9. As usual, he gets the best out of that car. He's been doing it so often this season. And Pierre Gasly has been easily one of the top 5 best drivers this season. That's not to be debated. Won the Italian Grand Prix. Yes, I know the circumstances were fucking mental, but when he was put in the position to execute, he did what he needed to do, and it was a great win to hold off Carlos Sainz, to not buckle under pressure, which other drivers would have. Other drivers would have buckled under that pressure, but he didn't. He kept it cool, kept it calm, brought it home for a race win. And what a win it was. But if we look through the season, I wouldn't say a win has been coming, but a big result this year for him and the team has been coming. The first race of the season, he finished in P7. That was kind of because of the extra retirements we had of Ricciardo and Stroll and Verstappen and Albon. That did help, because the AlphaTauri car wasn't quite there at the very start of the season. And that was proven by the second race in Austria. Hungary, he did well, but then the power unit was on its last legs and finally blew a gasket in the race. And then at Silverstone, that's really where Gasly started to shine. That first race, at the end of that race, in the last, 10 laps, some of his overtakes were phenomenal. The one around the outside of Sebastian Vettel, just a classic overtaking move. Classic overtaking move. The one on Stroll down the inside at turn 1. Such, bravery and balls to pull that off and have the skill to not go too deep and go off the track. Great, move, great pace, great race from Gasly. Then in the second Silverstone race, in qualifying, he did very well. I think it was P7 or something like that. But in the race, he didn't score any points, I don't believe. And it was because of the same thing, really, as what Ricciardo suffered from. Pitting at the wrong times, coming out in traffic, and things just not working out, minus the spin that Ricciardo had, of course. But then we get to Spain, where Gasly is in the top 10 in qualifying in the race, was very good again. Probably could have got a better result if it wasn't for traffic of Ocon and Magnussen. Then at Spa, great drive, especially an amazing first stint on the hard compound tyre to do what he was doing. Even in the first stint before the safety car, to be that close to the cars ahead on tyres that were a lot slower at that point of the Grand Prix, or at least in theory should have been a lot slower. Great performance, great comeback through the field, and if there was a couple more laps, he would have probably finished even higher than what he did. And then, of course, the Italian Grand Prix, even if you take out the win, like if you look at what he did before the safety car came out, he was still driving well. He was in the top 10. He did have his teammate right behind him, but his teammate was on, I think. No, he wasn't on softer tyres. He was on the harder tyre. Yeah, he was. The Fiat was on a different strategy, but what Gasly was doing on his own was still good. I think it was P9, something like that. And then, yeah, he was consistently looking like, based on the pace he was doing in the race, that he was going to get points. And the way things worked out, I think he pitted a lot earlier than other drivers did. I think he pitted right before the safety car came out. And then that's how he benefited. And of course, the red flag and all of that. And then, Hamilton getting his penalty. And then, yeah, Gasly got into the lead. And then, as I said earlier, kept cool and calm and got the result that maybe he didn't deserve based on that race. But I think considering what he's been through, he deserved. And I will admit, I am man enough to admit that I actually did cry when he won the race. Because, not because of what he's been through, but because obviously one of his best friends, Antoine Hubert, died almost exactly a year before, his race win. I think it was a year and a week, exactly, or almost exactly, like a year and 8 days or something like that, since Hubert's death. And I thought it was just a great, similar to Leclerc's win at Spa the day after. It was just such a great emotional moment. And literally, as the laps were going, to the final laps, I was welling up every lap because I thought, oh, he's actually going to do it. He's actually going to do it. And then when he won, yeah, it wasn't, floods of tears, but it was tears of joy because I was so happy for him. And even though I do like Carlos Sainz, I would have been angry if Carlos Sainz had won because it would have ruined the moment, to be honest. But yeah, great moment for Gasly. And of course, Mugello was just a non-starter for him, but who cares? He won the Italian Grand Prix. That's better than a lot of people will do in their racing careers. And yeah, AlphaTauri this weekend look as though they're on for another solid points finish, like they've had with Gasly most of the season. They P8, P9, maybe P7 at best they can get. But Gasly is, as usual, driving at his best, doing very well, and I think Gasly will finish in the points. I do kind of have disappointment flowing for Daniel Kvyat because it's his home race and you would have expected a bit of a better performance. But if you actually look at this season, Daniel has been quite poor in qualifying. He has been quite poor. And if you actually take away his performances in qualifying and just look at his races, he's actually been pretty good. He's finished in the points or in the top 10 a few times. The problem's been he starts in P15, P16, P17, whatever fucking position it is back there. And that's why he can only finish in 10th or 9th when if he starts 11th, 12th, he can finish 8th or 9th. But the problem for Daniel is qualifying. And again, kind of here with 13th, you can say, again, he's not setting himself up well enough for the Grand Prix. And he will be better in the Grand Prix because the car is pretty good on its tyres in terms of race pace. The AlphaTauri has always been good, you know, when it was Toro Rosso and all that. And Daniel tends to be quite good in the race. But again, qualifying, he just cannot have a good qualifying session to save his life. And I think that if he does get dropped from this team for, is it Yuki Tsunoda? That he's the guy in line to replace him. If he does get dropped, he has only himself to blame, because if he did have those good, consistently, maybe not strong, but stronger than what he has been having qualifying sessions, he'd probably be staying at this team because he'd be scoring points on a regular basis. He's scoring more points, leading to AlphaTauri being closer to the teams above them in the constructors. So, yeah, Daniel just hasn't executed qualifying well enough in 2020. But this team this year, I don't think has been any worse than they were last year. And I think they've been just as good, really, as they were last year. And if Gasly can finish in the top 10 and both Ferraris do not finish in the top 10, then AlphaTauri continue to close in on Ferrari. And for me, the big question when it comes to Ferrari is, and kind of AlphaTauri, is who will be the highest placed Italian team at the end of this year? Will it be Ferrari or will it be AlphaTauri? I think it'll be AlphaTauri, because I don't think Ferrari's car is going to get any better between now and the final race, when the AlphaTauri will probably stay about where it is. You know, getting just about inside the top 10, scoring 2 to 4 points a race. And the Ferrari is getting worse. They're scoring even less points now than they were even at the start of the season, where we were mocking them for how bad they were. So let me know in the comments and in the chat, who will win that battle in the constructors? Ferrari or AlphaTauri? I think it'll be AlphaTauri because they're in better form. Let me know in the chat. But as you can hear again, my throat is very, very sore. Let me have a quick drink and then I'll read your comments out in a moment, and then we'll get to the end of the stream where we'll cover the last few teams. Right, let's take a quick look. Ferrari seems to be worse at race pace. Remember Mugello when Leclerc started 5th and was up to 3rd and just dropped like a stone. Yeah, he did. That's the thing with Ferrari this year, how bad they are. Even though their biggest weakness is straight line speed, that doesn't mean that their biggest strength is grip, because it isn't. Again, as I said earlier, the grip of their car is no better than it was last year. So they're still horrible on tyre wear. Front end is still poor. Rear end is now poor. And now they have no power. And that's why in the race, even if they have a bad qualifying, they still fall back because they eat through their tyres too quickly and then have to pit too early than they really want to or should do. So, yeah. Ferrari are just... I should have said this earlier, but there is no redeeming qualities of that Ferrari car at all. There's not one area of the car you can say, this is good. There isn't. The only good thing is that they got 2 very good drivers in the car, making it look better than it actually is. Because I can tell you, if they had Perez and Stroll in that car, it would be horrific. And no disrespect to Perez and Stroll. They're good drivers, but they're not as good as Leclerc and Vettel. And if Leclerc and Vettel can't score barely any points in the last 3 or 4 races in that car, then boy, not many can. Not many can, because those two are very good, and we know that. JB. To be honest, Chaz's throat has always had poor unreliability. Maybe that's the parts Ferrari use for their new engine. Oh, God. Poor reliability, yeah. What I thought you should have said. Have a quick look at any comments I missed. Spider Monkey, I cried a lot when Perez was fired. I felt sorry for him because, again, there was nothing he could do. Wrong place, wrong time. The only way he could have kept that seat is if he did what Gasly did this year and just overseeded his expectations to the point where it would be a scandal if they dropped him. But he didn't do that, missed those 2 races, so that was what was going to happen. It was inevitable. I was hoping it wasn't going to happen, but it was inevitable. But saying that, Vettel and Stroll is not a bad lineup. Very consistent. And I think Vettel next year will bounce back. Not completely. I don't think it will be the Sebastian Vettel of 2010 or 2011. But he will be stronger next year when he's in a team that actually wants him. And he'll be driving a car that will be better than the Ferrari car. That's without a doubt. Because Racing Point are now just going to develop the 2019 Mercedes, which is what their car is. And actually, I just saw something in my Discord, which, by the way, the Discord we still do have. We have almost 500 people in the Discord, so if you do want to join that and join in the conversation with people during the races and qualifying sessions during 2020 and just chat about F1, or you want to contact me, talk about anything, then don't forget to join that. The link is in the description down below. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, someone in the Discord put an article, and it was about how Racing Point, I think, are going to use the 2020 rear end of the Mercedes, either for the rest of this year or next year, something like that. If anyone can provide further clarification to that, then please do. But I thought I saw that in my Discord, which I thought was quite interesting. So that does happen. Sebastian is going to be a very happy bunny in 2021, going into then 2022, where Aston Martin should have put aside a lot of money to develop that year's car, considering they're basically just borrowing another car. Or, you know, taking heavy inspiration from another car, rather. Right, let me find final comment. Hey, Rugara, Aston Martin versus Renault next year. I'll have you know that it's not Aston Martin versus Renault next year. It's Aston Martin versus Alpine F1 next year. By the way, is that how you pronounce it? Renault's new team name for next year? I mean, that Alpine F1. Not exactly the most inspirational, sexy team name, is it? Alpine F1. Maybe they're doing that because they're worried Alonso will trash the reputation of Renault with his bitching and complaining. I mean, I don't know. I think it's because they want to sponsor, or not sponsor, but they want to get exposure out for that part of their brand. But I don't see why they're getting rid of the team name Renault. I don't see why that's happening. Confusing to me. Alpine. Okay, I'll make sure to remember that for next year. If I fuck up the pronunciation a lot, though, then I'm probably just going to end up calling them Renault, or the team from Enstone. Anyway, let's go away from AlphaTauri and get into the final three teams. Williams, Haas and Alfa Romeo, who continuously, every single Grand Prix, have a shit-off, not a playoff, a shit-off, to find out who's going to be the least shit, or the worst, or the most shit, every Grand Prix. And some races, the least shit is Alfa Romeo, sometimes it's Haas, sometimes it is Williams. And Ferrari, of course, and certain races have joined that too. And they will be certainly when we get to the Bahrain Grand Prix, especially the oval Bahrain Grand Prix. What an epic race that'll be, from 13th to last place. But yeah, Williams today, 14th on the grid for Russell. I mean, it's good. And the best he could have done. There's not really much to say about what they did today. They did the best they could. Latifi 19th. I think Latifi, to be honest, did the best he could. We know Latifi's not as good as Russell. I think actually Latifi's done pretty well this season, considering how good I think Russell is. And I think, to be honest, how good you think Latifi is dependent on how good you think Russell is. If you don't think Russell is as good as people think, then you probably think Latifi's awful. But if you think Russell is as good as I think, which I think Russell is right up there with your Charles Leclerc's, Max Verstappen's, he's that good, in my opinion. And once he gets into a good enough car, I think he'll show you that. And that's why I think Latifi this year has actually been pretty good, considering who his teammate is. So Latifi today, I think that's the best he could have done, to be honest. And I saw his lap. He didn't do any big mistakes. Russell, though, as usual, getting the best out of the car. Another Q2 appearance. And hopefully Williams soon can actually get their first point of the season. I actually think they deserve to get a point at the race in Mugello, but the reason they didn't get a point was simple. Russell got a poor start on that second restart after the red flag. The second red flag restart. He got a poor start. That's why he didn't finish in the points. If he maintained the position he was in, he would have got a point. At least. He may have even beat both Ferraris in the race, because the Williams in a straight line was so quick down that pit straight. They were gaining, what, 4 or 5 tenths? And then in the middle sector, they weren't losing that much at all. So that's the only reason Williams have not scored a point, really. But yeah, this season, Russell has been great. I mean, there's been a couple times where he's got through to Q2, and not only got through to Q2, but almost got into Q3. See, for example, the second qualifying session of the year in Styria, or Austria, the Styrian Grand Prix, whatever it is. He was only, what, a 10th away from getting into the top 10. So, yeah, he's been great, considering that car is still poor. It's nowhere near as poor as it was last year. It's now competitive with other cars, but only really because Haas and Alfa Romeo are struggling with the degraded or downgraded Ferrari power unit that they've got. But still, they're doing well, considering what last year was. The only thing really Williams can do this year is get at least 1 points finish. I think that's the only thing they can really do, because they're not going to develop their car over the last few races to be, possibly near a point on pure pace rather than luck. So, yeah, I think Williams, the aim for the rest of the year has got to be nick a point somehow, some way. Hopefully it rains at the Nürburgring and we finish 9th or something like that. And if they were to do that, of course, they would actually overtake Haas F1 in the Constructors. So if they are to finish in the points, hopefully from their point of view, it's not just P10, but more than that. Because again, if they could do, say, 1 points finish this year, they be P9 or P8, then they can be no longer last in the Constructors, and that'll help them financially going forward, of course, because of the prize money increase for finishing higher in the constructors compared to finishing last. So hopefully Williams can get that. But yeah, things are looking better, but they are still way, way, way away from where they should be, considering it's Williams F1. And of course, it is sad that the Williams family is no longer part of Formula One. I am actually going to do a video about this probably before the end of the year, about how, the Williams family, I won't say fell apart, but how their grip on the team fell apart and how it all just, broke down, and how this team went from very close to being champions again with BMW to being a laughingstock. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but all I'll say is it's sad for us fans that the Williams family is gone, and it's sad for us fans that what has happened, but I do not feel sorry at all for the Williams family, because they have only done this to themselves. The reason they've done this to themselves is stubbornness, pride, and ego. They, I get it. They're very proud of it being a family-run business, but when BMW came on board, they needed to drop that pride shit and just let a manufacturer not take over the team, but help out. And they wouldn't, because they were too stubborn, too egotistical, because they've done it before. One with other manufacturers before, and they wanted to do it their way, and their way didn't work. When if you actually look in the past at when Williams has partnered with manufacturers, it's been, it's gone both ways as to who's been responsible for the success. So they should honestly have dropped that and let BMW take on a bit more of the financial burden, which I think Ralf Schumacher went into a bit when he was on Beyond the Grid. And if that had happened, this wouldn't have happened. But even if you forget that BMW failure, the failure of not winning with BMW when they really should have, considering the power that V10 was producing in 2001, 02, 03, 04, this team should have been sold a long time ago. It should have been sold, honestly, around 2012, 2013, if they were really wanting to get this team back up where it should be. But, they refused to, because they thought it was still, they still knew best, and they were the only things that were going to get the team back to the top. Yes, with Mercedes power in 2014, they improved, but that was only because of Mercedes power, not because their car was actually any good. If they'd kept the, I think was it Renault power, Renault V8 they had 2012 and 13, if they kept that for 2014, they would have been awful, because that car in 2014 and 15 didn't really have any downfall compared to their rivals. So yeah, after that, they failed to capitalize and get a race win when they really should have got at least one race win, considering how quick they were at certain races. And then, what you've seen in the last year or so has been coming for a long time. But Williams, as a family, refused to see it coming. They were in denial about how they were the reason why it fell apart. They were the reason they went from third in the constructors to last in 4 years. They were the reason. They refused to, to see that, and that's why they've ended up back at square one. They're basically back where they were when they were started as a team, at square one. And they've put them in that position. And last thing I'll say is, as much as they're responsible for the success, they are just as responsible, if not more responsible, for the failure and for the downfall of the team. Haas F1, same as last season, isn't it? In terms of results, their car aerodynamically actually isn't that bad. Problem is, no power. because of the Ferrari power units, I guess now regulation. Sorry, I'm just... If anyone is watching the Chelsea game, and I think some of you guys know I'm a Chelsea fan. I've got the Chelsea game on as I'm doing this, and we've just conceded another goal. We're 2-0 down to West fucking Brom. And our star signing, Thiago Silva, has just done a Steven Gerrard and fucked about on the ball and basically slipped, and they've scored. Well, that's $250 million down the drain. But anyway, yeah, Haas F1, aerodynamically, their car is better this year. But the problem is, again, they don't have the power they had last year, so they can't show the improvement that I think they have made with the car. Of course, they got the points finish in Hungary, which was down to great tyre choice. You know, pitting on the formation lap, or the end of the formation lap, to get that tyre compound, that dry tyre compound on. But, yeah, they can't show how good their car is, or how much better their car is, because they don't have the power of last year. So I kind of feel sorry for them. And I especially feel sorry for Gunther Steiner, because the amount of swear words he's had to utter at every race weekend so far this year. Not just about how their teams performed and having to watch their team perform, but just watching Romain Grosjean perform gets him worked up, as we can see from Drive to Survive from last year. By the way, I saw Drive to Survive, and I saw that episode that focused in on Haas F1. Please, if there is anyone listening, please forget Drive to Survive. Do a season-long Amazon-style all-or-nothing documentary following Gunther Steiner and Haas F1 for the entire season. That would be fucking gold. Because that... When I saw that episode, I thought, this guy needs a documentary series on his own. He's that funny, and it's that dramatic. And he wasn't putting it on. That's just the way he is. That's just how bad Haas were last year to make him do that. And the best part, obviously, was when Magnussen and Grosjean crashed at Silverstone. And then they had the conversation in the I don't know, team lobby, whatever you want to call it. And then Magnussen smashed the door. And then Gunther said, he doesn't fuck smash my door, that is, in his accent, that is one of the funniest things I have ever heard. And by the way, talking of Chelsea, we are now 3-0 down to West Bromwich Albion. But yeah, when Gunther said, he doesn't fuck smash my door like that, in that accent, that was one of the greatest things I've heard in Formula 1 history. But yeah, Haas are Haas. There's nothing else to say. They're just Haas. Alfa Romeo last up. I think Alfa Romeo do have the slowest car on the grid. That's why they're last. Yeah. Their car aerodynamically hasn't improved on last year, hasn't gotten worse, but again, because of the power units downgrading levels of power, kind of like Ferrari. They're basically the midfield or lower midfield version of Ferrari. The aerodynamics hasn't improved, and because of the lack of power, that's why they've dropped. That's why Alfa Romeo are where they are. And I do feel sorry for the drivers, because they're trying. They are trying. But what can you do in that car, especially in qualifying? And the best they can hope for is, 15th place? Maybe 14th if someone's underperforming massively, or, crashes. Same thing kind of Haas F1. What can you do? Even if you do qualify 14th and 15th, people will look at that as a not so good performance. So, yeah. I don't really see where Alfa Romeo honestly are going as well. Because, got rid of being Sauber for this Alfa Romeo deal and being Ferrari B team, basically. But because they are so reliant on Ferrari when it comes to being a B team, they're now in such a poor position because of, they have the Ferrari power unit, they get parts from Ferrari, I think, certain parts, or there's some kind of working relationship. They're suffering because of it. So when does it become time for them to go back to being Sauber and to, using the new era of Formula One where the cost cap's going to come in and it's going to be a reset? When does the time come where they say, right, I think we need to go back to being a privateer, proper on our own team like it was with Sauber? I think that's what they need to start thinking, because if they get to 2022 and they're still in this kind of rut where they're basically, they're 8th in the constructors, but that's only because they've capitalized on loads of cars retiring in 2 races, not because their car is really quicker than Haas or Williams. But if they're like this in 2 years' time, at what point do they say, we can't really do this Alfa Romeo deal anymore, we need to become Sauber again? When does that time come? I really want to know, because I think they need to make that decision very soon, especially with the way the world is economically. But let me, I'll put Ferrari back on. Why don't I? Because we are basically at the end of the stream. I'm going to quickly, though, read out some final comments from you guys, and then we'll get to the end. I wasn't supposed to be streaming for 2 hours. It was supposed to be an hour, but it turned out to be 2 hours. That just shows you how much fun I've had doing this. Tonka, by the way, great to see you, Tonka, after so long in the chat. Great to see you, mate. Saying Ferrari did not do Haas any favours. Yeah, same with them as well. And I think Haas have also got to look at that and think, if Ferrari continue to perform this poorly, then what does that do to our working relationship? They've got to, figure that out. Nib says, team had real hope when Toto was there, and then Merck snapped him up. Yeah, if they kept Toto, they probably would have gone, rather than declining as a team, they probably would have gone the other way. And if Toto eventually did go to a Mercedes or a Ferrari or wherever, they'd still be a very, very relevant team in the pack. But Toto wasn't really there long enough to make that, to make a difference, even though he was making a difference. Because, as you said, Merck, they snapped him up really early. I only remember seeing Toto Wolff during 2012, and then by 2013, he was at Mercedes. So, yeah. Right. Let's find, if I can, a couple final comments. Opinions on Ferrari Juniors to Haas or Alfa 2021? Well, you got what? Mick Schumacher, Robert Schwartzman, Callum Ilott, and is that it? I think. At the moment, it looks as though Mick Schumacher is going to drive for Alfa Romeo in 2021, which is not a surprise, because as Tonka said, he won the F2 race today, and I think he's leading the F2 championship, if I'm not mistaken. And really, that is what the basis of the decision as to who gets the seat at Alfa Romeo. And I think one of the seats will be up for, not sale, but you know what I mean, up for being taken. That's the basis that the decision has to be made on. Who finishes highest in the F2 title race? And if it's Mick Schumacher, got to give it to him. Even if, and I know people will say, oh, but people only talk about him because he's Michael's son. And yeah, of course they do. He's the son of Michael fucking Schumacher. Of course they do. But he's proven this year that Schumacher's son or not, he's been the best. So he should get the seat. That's how it should be done. Ewok says, welcome back, Chazza. Thank you very much for this, dude. You've been greatly missed by your subs and your much love within the F1 YouTube community. F1 fanatics wish you all the best too. Thank you very, very much. Right, let me find a couple final comments here, and then I'll get to the end. And then I'll let you guys know what the plan is going forward, because I will be doing something tomorrow as well. Grosjean ain't that bad this year, to be fair. There's been a couple races where he's done decent, but there's been a couple where it might as well have not even bothered getting in the car. Right, let me find one final one. And we'll get to the end here. We'll end on this one from Warwick Bull, who says, I think one issue with the Haas team is Steiner, because a lot of people say he has an attitude that can be very demoralizing for everyone on the team. I 100% get what you're talking about. He can be very kind of negative, but I think he expects a lot, because what he was brought in to do, because he's been at, Toro Rosso before, and was he at Red Bull before that, or kind of at the same time, can't remember. But what he's trying to do, because Haas are a new F1 team, he's trying to install into the team what it takes to be a somewhat successful F1 team in the midfield. So that's why he's so, I think, demanding. And he is very demanding, but I think that's what he was brought in to do. And I think that's why he was chosen as team boss. Yeah, and I do get it. He can be very, again, demanding and critical. But I think, as he said in that series, when Magnussen and Grosjean crashed, Gene Haas is putting a lot of his money into this. He doesn't want to be, out of Formula One in a few years' time, having accomplished nothing. I mean, the biggest accomplishment, and their only real big accomplishment or notable accomplishment, is fifth in the Constructors in 2018. Since then, it's been downhill. And if it keeps going downhill, even though Haas have committed to the next era of Formula One, if Haas don't start going forward consistently soon, then he's not going to keep wasting his money. So that's why Gunther Steiner has to be so demanding, because, Gene Haas wants it to be a success. He does not want to waste tons of money on something that's not going to work out at all. He wants it to be a success. So that's what you need. And to be honest, I think that's what Ferrari need. They need people who demand success, who are not lazy, but casual, and again, not demanding enough. That's what Ferrari need. They need people, and that's what successful teams have. They have people leading the team who demand a certain level to get certain results. That's why Toto Wolff is where he is. That's why Horner's where he is. That's why all the team bosses who were successful in the past did what they did. You need that. And yeah, it can be a bit demoralizing sometimes, even if they've had a good result. But if you want to win, that's the standard you've got to have. You've got to have a very high standard, and you've got to have that mindset as a team if you're going to go forward as a team. And if you look at Ferrari, for example, Ferrari would actually be a lot better off if they had Gunther Steiner at the team, because he would actually give the team not an uplift, but he would actually let them know of, like, right, guy, this is Ferrari. The standard needs to be higher. We need to demand more. But Binotto, because he's not a leader, he doesn't demand what is required from Ferrari to be champions, or to be even winning races at the moment. So, yeah, it can be negative. Yeah, it can be demanding. But the best bosses in sport, really. That's the way they are. They're not, nicey nice, oh, don't worry about it type of people. They demand success continuously. But, right, I think I'm finally done, guys, with today's stream. I have streamed for 2 hours and 10 minutes. My plan was to stream for maybe to an hour and a half at most. It just shows you how much fun you have, doing this sort of thing. I want to thank everyone who came along to watch this stream, because it's been great to do this again. I've honestly missed doing this for so long, and it's great, obviously, that we have Formula 1 back and all of that stuff. Now, before I go, I just want to let you guys know that I am going to do this again tomorrow at the same time, which will be, 4 p.m. UK time? And that'll be about 2 hours or an hour or 2.5 hours, rather, after the race finishes tomorrow. So 4 p.m. UK time, I am planning on doing this again, a race reaction and talking about how the teams did, how the drivers did, having a conversation with you guys about everything that happened in the race, all of that stuff. I won't announce it officially yet, because, you never know what's going to happen in life. But if everything goes to plan, then around midday tomorrow, or before midday, probably 10, 11 a.m. UK time, I'll say in my community tab on my YouTube page, I'll say, right, I'll be live at 4 p.m. and same in the Discord as well. So thank you guys for tonight. Yeah, it's been great. Really has been great. And that's why I'm going to do it again tomorrow, 4 p.m. And we'll probably go another 2 hours, probably. And then, yeah, after that, I have got a video that I am working on. I'm not going to say what it is, but I have got a video that I'm working on. All I've got to do really is rewrite the script, do the commentating, the audio, and then put all of the visual and audio stuff together. And then it should be done. I don't know when that's going to be, though. I'm hoping it'll be out sometime next month. But if there is some sort of delay, then I'll let you guys know. But I'm hoping it'll be sometime next month. Should be a pretty kick-ass video. I get done all the things I want to get done. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along. It's been so great. It's been so great, obviously, for my mental health. Do this again. And I have missed doing this again. And I also want to say before I go that if anyone has anything they want to talk to me about, even if it's stuff about your own mental health, or you want to send me any well wishes, anything, in the description is contact info. Either you can join my Discord server if you're not a part of it and contact me on there via DM, or you can email me, and the email address is in the description as well. chazerhdf1@gmail.com if you want to contact me about anything. But until the race tomorrow, and until our race reaction, which again should be 2 to 2.5 hours after the race finishes, I'll see you guys then. And again, thank you very much. And hopefully tomorrow's race is a bit more exciting than Russian Grand Prix normally tend to be.